Good evening, everyone. My name is Zen Honeycutt, and I'm the founding executive director of Moms Across America. We are on our Moms Connect call. It's February 10th, and we do these every Monday night unless there's a holiday or I'm traveling. And what's been really great lately is we've been bringing on people from other groups or other areas that we don't necessarily normally talk about, but as long as they pertain to the health of our children, we are really interested in finding out what we can do to protect our children. Our mission at Moms Across America is to educate and empower mothers and others with actions and solutions to create healthy communities. And inside of that, there are all kinds of things which are threatening the health of our children. We mostly focus on GMOs and glyphosate and toxins in pretty much everything that's out there. And we have also touched upon 5G. Our past 3 calls have been about 5G. Tonight, I am going to a 5G meeting at my city council. Been working really hard and getting some great information together on that. And we're going to talk about that more later on one of our next calls. And tonight we're going to talk about vaping. And vaping is illegal for children. However, my children go into high school and are inundated in the bathrooms by vapors, right? It's a problem. It's happening in high schools across the country, maybe even middle schools. And so I want to know, how to talk to my kids about this, what to say, why is this not such a great idea for kids? I mean, it's illegal for a reason, but why wouldn't they want to do it? Because it is accessible to them. It is available, right? So tonight our call is it's not about adult vaping. I want to be clear about that, right? This is about our children doing something that's not only illegal, because there's a lot of things that are illegal, but it's really unhealthy for them. And there's reasons why, and we're going to talk about that. And we're going to, answer some questions. Again, if you're just getting on the call with us tonight, down below your screen, if you put your cursor below the bottom of your screen, there's a little chat bubble. And you can click on that and ask questions if you like. And so we're going to get started with Dorian, Furman, and Meredith. What's your last name again?
Berkman.
Oh, Berkman. Okay, great. First of all, welcome, ladies. I'm going to try to do this so that it goes, it's a cancel spotlight video. Okay, so can we see everybody? Great. Okay. Welcome to the call. Do you want to say a little bit about your background before we get started?
We started Parents Against Vaping E-Cigarettes. The catalyst for our starting this group was in April of 2018, when Dorian's son and my son and our third co-founder's son were starting at a new high school in New York. Our sons came home from school one day, and my son said to me and to my husband, there was a very mixed messaging anti-addiction talk about Juul today through an outside anti-addiction group that had come into the school. And the adult speaker, presumably an educator, when the teachers left the room, as they do for this kind of a presentation, so the kids will speak freely, he told the 9th graders that Juul was not for kids, it was for adults, but he repeatedly said, but it's, quote, totally safe. And he also told the kids in the room that Juul would be receiving FDA approval any day. And to this day, both those things remain untrue. And within 24 hours, Dorian and I and our third co-founder, Dina Alessi, did our own research. And what we learned was that that person actually was a Juul representative that the outside anti-addiction group had naively contacted through Juul when they were Googling best speakers for teens not to Juul. The magic of Google Analytics brought them directly to the Juul website, where a named employee then said, I have the perfect person to tell kids not to Juul. And what we learned very quickly as we did our own research, as I know you do and so many of your moms across America do, is late at night when the kids were asleep, we started to research Juul, e-cigarettes, and we realized that that kind of predatory behavior by Juul, of going into schools and telling children that Juul was, quote, totally safe, was part of a broader pattern of predatory behavior that was going on across the country. And we realized the enormous scope of this problem. And so while we might have preferred to join a Mothers Against Drunk Driving, a vaping, It did not yet exist because it was so early in this crisis. And so we decided to start it. And that begins our journey and brings us here to you today.
Can you talk now?
There's one thing we know about.
Okay, there we go.
Yes, it worked.
Okay.
Okay. As I'm going to say that moms like you and moms like us are not deterred by technical difficulties because the topics are really important and we really care.
We will keep going. That's for sure. Okay. So while you were doing that, I showed some images of how they were being, how these flavors are being marketed, and clearly they're not being marketed, or were not being marketed for just smoking cessation. That is one of the major arguments, is that vaping is used for smoking cessation. It is saving lives. I got a very interesting letter from a name named Rick, who's on with us tonight. Really thoughtfully worded. He's a vape owner, and how he has transitioned maybe 1,700, probably more than that, thousands of people from smoking with using vaping, and they're adults, obviously, right? So it's very thoughtful. I appreciate that, Rick. And but this marketing that we just showed was clearly not just for smoking cessation. That was marketed towards kids. So let's talk a little bit about the major issues that you see, and then we want to get to how do we talk to our kids about this. What do we actually say to our children? So go ahead and tell us a little bit more about some of the major issues that you see with vaping for teens, kids.
Well, I think there are so many issues going on right now, but I think it's important to know that in spite of the policy guidance, which was enacted on January 1st, there are still thousands of disposable devices that come in hundreds of different flavors that are incredibly cheap and accessible to teens. And the problem with these devices, we've spoken about the flavors before, it's the flavors that attract the kids and prevent the kids from perceiving harm in the product. It's the high levels of nicotine that addict them and keep them coming back. Now, nicotine for an adult is also an addictive substance, but for a child, it will affect the developing brain. A child's brain is not developed until the age really of 25, nor are their lungs. Their lungs are not developed until the age of 25 either. So by introducing these high levels of nicotine, by introducing these chemicals into their brains, into their lungs, you're creating permanent cognitive change and damage to their brain. And this change can exhibit itself in, troubles with impulse control, memory issues, anxiety, sudden outbursts of anger, the inability to concentrate. And then I think most importantly is the fact that it rewires the developing brain for further addiction. So by becoming addicted to these high levels of nicotine, the child is then more likely and more able to become addicted to other substances.
And the lung issues are very, very serious. And when we say that, we're not referring just to the, what is referred to as, EVALI, which is sort of a broad term for different lung injuries that have happened to teens, to young people from using these devices. The underlying epidemic is the youth vaping epidemic, and this terrible spate, thousands of people who've suffered lung injury and the dozens who have died from this. That is a symptom of the underlying epidemic. And so what we're most focused on, as you are, is what is going into our kids' brains, into our kids' lungs. And, this is an entire generation of kids, our kids, who would otherwise not have been initiated into the use of any tobacco products, but for the flavors that hooked them and the nicotine that addicted them. And we know that is true because before the Juul, came on the market in late 2015 and began marketing to kids, which has been well documented and proven multiple times through congressional testimony, including from us and our own kids and in reporting. The youth smoking figures were the lowest that they had been ever. They were below 7%. So we know, because of all the really important work and education that was done over decades, it was not cool to smoke. people felt smoking was disgusting. They felt smoking could kill you. It could give you cancer. And so that is one of the great tragedies, that all of that important work that was done to counter, the lying and the predatory behavior of big tobacco through cigarettes, all of that work has been undone and has led to this current youth vaping epidemic. And in the end, we don't know what will happen. Our kids are being used as human guinea pigs by the e-cigarette industry for their flavored e-cigarettes, or as they're also called, flavored vapes.
So the question I have to ask, I get that the lure of Juul and the flavor, all the different flavors, had kids introduced to this vaping product that might not normally have been doing anything like that, most likely not smoking, because smoking has been seen now as really, we've made so much progress that way. But I have to ask, is there anything that's wrong with the flavors besides the fact that they're attractive to kids? Like, do these flavors contain toxins? Do they contain, I know that, Fruit Loops and things like that in the United States, they contain all kinds of red dyes and colors that aren't in Europe. And I know Europe, the UK especially, really heavily regulates vaping. So is it the same type of thing? Are there dyes and chemicals in the flavors that are not in the non-flavored?
So that's a really interesting question. And the truth is, again, because these products have still to this day not been fully regulated by FDA, we don't know the answer. We know the toxins and the carcinogens that are in these products, but the flavors have remained proprietary. So unless you are a researcher and you are doing research on a particular flavor of a particular brand, and you're able to break that flavor and that brand down, unless you are at that level, you will never know what crazy cocktail of toxins are in those flavors. You only know the toxins that are in the vape juice, just in every flavor.
Right, and if I can
or
add,
a tobacco flavor.
If I can add, these flavors might be deemed safe by the FDA for consumption.
Some of the products in the flavors.
Exactly. Some of the chemicals in the flavors might have been deemed safe for consumption, but the fact that they are being heated at extremely high levels, combined with other chemicals, particles of lead or metal, or and combined with each other at these high levels, and then forming other chemicals which are not listed in the ingredient base. As Meredith said, our kids are being used as human guinea pigs. It's going to take, long-term longitudinal studies to really understand what a lot of these products are doing to our kids' lungs long-term. And we just don't have that time.
Right. I want to make sure that people know the main reason why we're so concerned about toxins in our kids is because it has been proven that our kids are not fully developed until
absolutely.
Yeah. So they're not fully developed. Their livers and their kidneys aren't fully formed until they are much older than, teens, and their brains are not fully formed until they're 25. Just for an example, a child doesn't grow kneecaps until he's 3 years old. Like, a baby does not have kneecaps.
Wow. Well, I didn't know that.
So just check a baby out the next time. You just look, they don't have kneecaps. So the body is forming and developing. And when they don't have a fully formed liver and kidney, they cannot detox the way that an adult does.
Exactly.
So that's one of the science-based reasons why we really want to protect our children from toxins. Besides that, they're our kids and we love them. We do anything to protect them, including speak up against, not against, but speak up about a topic in which we will get heavily criticized. We care less about our, being name called and our personal reputation than we do about the safety of our kids. So that's why these brave women, have spoken up and really want to make sure that people know about this. So I want to keep talking about the ingredients for a little bit, because I think people really may not know a lot of this. I did not know a lot of this. There's this study by CannaSafe, and these are, it looks to me like these are vapes that use cannabis, but I'm not sure. I haven't looked at all of the study, but they definitely talk about vitamin E being in.
Right.
So can we talk about vitamin E acetate a little bit? What is
Sure.
in vaping liquid, and what could it be doing to our children?
So I have to say that, you know, we are focused solely on flavored e-cigarettes, and the EVALI, the lung illnesses that are called collectively EVALI. The CDC and FDA have been investigating these cases, and they have found that a large number of them, the samples from those victims were using, we're using both THC, which is which is, you know, in marijuana, and nicotine products. So the assumption is that a majority of those people were using both THC and nicotine, and that it is the thickening agent, the vitamin E acetate, that may have and likely impacted the lungs of a number of those cases.
Of those
who died. There is also a much smaller number of people who their bodies, the samples showed that they were only using nicotine. So while yes, it is correct that the majority of the lung injury cases were people who were using THC, and THC, the vitamin E acetate is a thickening agent that, when heated and put into your lungs, in some of those cases created, you know, all kinds of, you know, you can imagine like putting heavy oil liquid into your lungs, but it's not conclusive. But really, that for us,
it's not all of it.
It's not all of it, but the issue is, again, we see the terrible tragedy of those who lost their lives and of those who suffered very serious lung injuries as young people. I mean, we have, you know, moms that we work with across the country. You know, in one case, actually someone who's here with us where we are today, whose child, you know, suffered really catastrophic lung injury. It will take him years to recover. You know, we have another mom that we work with whose daughter recovered quickly, but there's no long-term evidence. The issue for us is that the underlying epidemic, the cause of these lung injuries, is the vaping epidemic. And the 5.3 million kids who are vaping on a regular basis, the kids who have not suffered these lung injuries that are known as EVALI, you know, it could be years before we know what the damage is. But in many cases, there are young people who have suffered, you know, severe asthma, much worse than any underlying asthma, or they developed asthma, which they didn't have before, or they have developed restrictive lung injury, you know, lung illness. They can no longer run a mile. They were athletes. They're huffing and puffing.
And even seizures.
And there's also the issue of seizures. So I think that some people in the, you know, vaping community are quick to say this is all about the THC, but it's not. This is about the predatory behavior of companies that lured an entire generation of young people to use these products because of the flavors, then addicted by the nicotine. Nicotine is a gateway drug. And so, you know, while, you know, we're focused on the underlying epidemic, we don't know what tomorrow holds, either for the people who are still recovering from serious lung injury or people who are having their young lives impacted because they're continually using these products.
Okay, I'm going to share some more of this CannaSafe study that showed they tested for 10 out of 10 were positive for pesticides. I can't seem to find which pesticides on the study, but they also were positive for all of these other things. You know, for
So Zen, I think a lot of those are THC. Stitsy, the dank vapes, and those are mostly THC vapes, which many of them do contain vitamin E acetate, which has been found in most of the actual deaths that have been caused when they've done the autopsies. However, we are talking about the vaping devices, the nicotine vaping devices. And now that the government has restricted and banned all the flavored pod-based systems except for menthol and tobacco, our focus now is the disposable devices, which I don't know if you can see these, but you know, these are small disposable devices that come in a variety of flavors. And I'll actually show you the boxes. You know, here's this is a watermelon, and here's black and blueberry, and here's, you know, blazing vibe. You know, so all of these devices are disposable now. They're brand new to the market. A lot of these have not been out before, or if they were out for a nanosecond in 2015 before the grandfathering of these devices by the FDA, and now they're back out. And they're made with cheap plastics and metals, and the kids can use them for a night. They contain about the same nicotine as a pack or two of cigarettes, and they throw them out before they get home. So see, they can be held in the hand. You can't even see, and they come in hundreds and hundreds of flavors. So this is where our focus is now, because again, these are devices that parents don't know are out there that can look like a normal flash drive for a computer, and that come in hundreds of flavors that are not regulated. And the FDA now, these devices have to apply for pre-market review before May 12th, 2020, so just in a couple of months. But then they'll stay on the market for a year or so until they're accepted or denied, and we're not going to know what our kids are using.
Right. That's because the process is not transparent. And I just want to also say that the visual that you just showed, and it said illicit carts, you know, our focus is on the flavored nicotine products. We're not experts on THC and marijuana.
Okay.
I mean,
I appreciate that, but for me as a parent, it's all the same, because once a kid starts vaping, he's very easily could go over to a THC vape. And
100%.
Yes, nicotine is a gateway drug. You're correct.
And I know people are going to be very upset that I'm saying on here, because there are distinctions. And of course, vape shop owners, I'm guessing, have to sell different things and have it be very distinct. And, you know, it is a different thing. But for me as a parent, I would see one as, I mean, it's like whether they drink beer or vodka. It's, to me, it's still going to be harmful. One might be a little more harmful at higher levels or amounts or whatever, but it's still, to me, it still sounds like it's going to be harmful, right? But you're focusing, I get, you're focusing on the nicotine-based ones. And what was really interesting in the letter that Rick sent me, this vape shop owner, is that he agreed with you and said that it is the high levels of nicotine. They call it salt nicotine or salt.
Nicotine salt, yes.
Yeah. That some of these, especially Juul, they put in 50 milligrams of this salt nicotine, and that's what gives the kids the head buzz. That's what
absolutely.
And
absolutely. And Juul patented that technology, and now all of these other brands are using them at even higher levels than Juul ever did. So Juul was at about 5%. You have brands that are now 6.87, and you know, no one even really understands how, you know, what the percentages and what the levels of nicotine are in these devices. So you are absolutely right, and the person who wrote you is absolutely right that this nicotine salt is much more addictive than nicotine of the past. It goes straight to your brain, you know, much faster, and you need to keep replenishing that nicotine. So that is one of the reasons why Juul created this youth vaping epidemic. The high levels of patented nicotine salts, the marketing to kids, the fun, fruity flavors, and, you know, here we are. You know, Juul created this, and there are dozens, if not, you know, hundreds of brands on the market who are now using this nicotine salt.
Okay, so what does the nicotine do when it gets to the brain?
So there's long-term research about nicotine's effect on the developing brain. And as I think Dorian said earlier, nicotine, just plain old nicotine, and you know, in the quote normal amount you would find in combustible cigarettes, and keeping in mind that there's so much more nicotine and it's delivered so much more efficiently to the brain through nicotine salt technology, thus making it all the more potent and highly addictive, particularly for the developing brain. It reprograms the developing brain. It affects the prefrontal cortex, and it reprograms it for further addiction. That's why nicotine has long been referred to as a gateway drug. And as Dorian says, it can create, cognitive issues. And so, for example, if you are a kid with any kind of ADHD or learning difference, you're that much more vulnerable to the effects of the nicotine. And so, that again, it is a gateway drug. That is old news, right? But with a new spin, which is all of a sudden the kids are getting so much more nicotine, so much quicker, so much more addictive. And that's just the lungs. And then, of course, as we've discussed somewhat, there are the irritation in the lungs. And that's separate from talking about people who have suffered what they're calling, quote, EVALI, the lung illness, right? The particulates are so small of these poisons, of the flavors, which, as we said, those are proprietary. We don't know what's in the flavors necessarily, but the formaldehyde and the propylene glycol and the degraded nickel or cadmium from the devices, all of this tiny, tiny particulates that go deep, deep into the lungs in an extremely efficient way, much deeper than the old pod mod vapes did. And the alveoli, the hairy linings of the lungs can become irritated. Again, that is separate from talking about those who have suffered really catastrophic lung illnesses and have been hospitalized or worse. But that's just what these particulates can do to your lungs. And then there is evidence of, of cardiac issues. There are cardiovascular issues. It is unconscionable when you consider, the former head of Juul himself, the CEO of Juul, the then CEO, said, we don't have any long-term evidence. We don't know what the harms will be. And so for adults who choose to use those devices, that's why we're not advocating for a ban on the devices themselves, nor a ban on the tobacco flavor. We are focused on the flavors, the characterizing flavors, the sweet, candy, minty flavors, because those are the flavors that the research has shown hook the kids and continue to hook the kids. And even if all flavors of these e-cigarettes were taken off the market tomorrow, we still will have to come to grips with 5.3 million young people who are regularly vaping. And we don't know how many of them are already severely addicted to nicotine, or who have gone on to other drugs because it's a gateway, or who have suffered, restrictions and damage in their medical history.
If I could just also go back to your question about nicotine, and you had mentioned Europe earlier, that for instance, Europe regulates dyes and chemicals. Well, Europe has regulated nicotine, and they have very strict nicotine caps on the devices that are available in Europe. And the devices that are available in America are 3 and 4 times the level of nicotine that are allowed in Europe. And there are many countries who have just banned these devices altogether. So, that says something, that it's,
that really gets me upset, because it's the same thing is happening with the food supply, right? They allow GMOs here and not in certain cereals in the UK, and that's happening all over the place. I want to read, just in case somebody can't read what I've highlighted here in this article. It says to test that, I guess they were looking at if certain vapors may be more susceptible to any kind of infection. He said to test that, Jasper's team collected immune cells from healthy people. These scientists then exposed those cells to the flavored liquids used to create vapors in e-cigarettes. So this is just the flavored liquids. Tested cells included blood neutrophils and lung macrophages. The body normally tasks both with gobbling up and killing bacteria. Some of the liquids proved disturbingly effective at preventing those immune cells from doing their job. One example was a cinnamon-flavored compound. It was found in several e-juices, including flavorings not associated with cinnamon such as cola. So that's disturbing. That's just the liquid, the flavoring caused those problems, never mind the nicotine problems that you just mentioned.
Exactly. It's, and more, every day that goes by, we're finding more and more studies which are proving that these devices are just as dangerous as people have thought. And, you know, whether it's the cardiovascular issues, whether it's the flavoring issues, the inability of the body to fight off infection, the fact that nicotine, you know, damages the cells so that cancer can actually take hold. I mean, there are so many different studies that are proving that these devices are not safe, and they're certainly not safe for our kids who, as you said earlier, their bodies are not fully formed. Their bodies can't filter the poisons. They can't get rid of them, and they're, you know, just damaging and destroying them.
And again, I just want to reiterate that, Zen, you know, as you have said, we're focusing and you're focusing on children, because children are not, they are not able to make educated decisions about what they're doing, especially when you have, you know, companies that are big tobacco companies now that are going after them and trying to seduce them. And so that's why we do not advocate for banning all vaping devices. There are some states where governors have taken that measure, and those are temporary measures. And there have been cases where, you know, that there are some states and some governors where that is sort of the first step to getting to removing flavored devices from the market. But it's for that reason that we're only talking about the characterizing flavors, not tobacco. And we feel that adults who choose to vape, that is their right. And so we're focused just on the flavors that have hooked the kids.
Yeah, well, if adults choose to vape, my vote would be that is safe. And, you know, because, I mean, let's face it, folks, if your neighbor is vaping and it's not safe and he gets lung disease at 38 years old or whatever, not disease,
or younger,
lung issues, right, at 38 years old, guess who pays for that? It's not just him and his insurance. All of our insurance levels go up. All of us pay more money. I just had to get blood tests for my son. It was $2,800 to get a blood panel check. I mean, and I don't know if my health share program is going to reimburse us or not. I mean, that is more than a mortgage for most people.
Right.
And
well, I'm so glad you raised the insurance issue. I'm sorry, Zen, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's a real issue long-term, because what we're hearing from parents around the country who are dealing with severe nicotine addiction caused by these devices, you know, every state has their own laws about insurance and their own state insurance commissioner. And so since, you know, many insurance companies programs do not cover severe nicotine addiction in minors. And so there are people who are being forced to pay out of pocket for, you know, for rehab in some cases, for inpatient treatment, all kinds of things to help their kids, for therapy. And so our fear is that sets this country up yet again for the haves and the have-nots. Those people who either have insurance, and perhaps they're in states where insurance will cover it, and then either those who don't have insurance or states where insurance companies say we're not going to cover that. That means that we will have an entire, you know, group of young people who could be nicotine addicts for the rest of their lives because they can't get treatment. And that's going to be long-term another very serious issue that we're trying to draw attention to.
Yeah. So one person asks, is there an issue with secondhand fumes or vapor?
You know, we've heard that there is. Again, it's a little too early, but if you're in an enclosed space and someone is vaping around you, you're inhaling those exact same chemicals. So, you know, that's why vaping has been included in many cities and states under the Indoor Clean Air Act. And you know, it's definitely a danger.
Right. And again, as Doreen said, it's a little too early to know. There are no longitudinal studies, for example, about kids who are going into, you know, school bathrooms and the particulates are so tiny that they're invisible and they're still hanging in the air. One researcher that we discuss this with does say that if you, for example, a kid who is at a party or is in a bathroom where there's been lots of vaping before they go repeatedly, there could be evidence in like a nicotine urine test of nicotine. But again, we won't know long-term how serious, the same way that this country didn't know long-term the dangers of secondhand smoke. And we saw how that ended, and God forbid we can't have that happen again.
Yeah, well, I've just opened up another study. We had some great research done before this call with you, and it's very troublesome to me, the amount of studies that there are already. This one, microglia activation and gene expression alteration of neutrophins. I don't know exactly what the neutrophins are, but in the hippocampus, that's in the brain, following early life exposure to e-cigarettes, aerosols in a murine model.
Right,
Alterations of the brain, right?
It's very important also to mention that first of all, we know it's not safe to vape. It is extremely dangerous to vape if one is pregnant. And in the beginning, when people would say, it might be safer than cigarettes, or you should use vaping to quit, there were extreme concerns that pregnant women would turn to vaping as a way to stop smoking. And we've heard from many researchers that, the extremely high levels of nicotine in these vapes makes the blood vessels constrict more than just regular cigarettes. And that can lead, to high blood pressure, that can lead to an accelerated heartbeat, that can also lead to bleeding problems or blood flow problems, which can damage a developing fetus. So that is incredibly important to be aware of. And then also, if you have children who are living in a household where there's, a lot of vaping going on, as you said, the secondhand smoke, even the thirdhand smoke for pets as well. We've had stories of people who, the pets are licking the table, or the aerosols that the pets and the kids are inhaling, or God forbid, the pets who are eating the pods, or getting into the nicotine liquid, which is toxic and deadly and can kill them. So there are so many different levels of dangers with these devices that, are just not top of mind.
Right. And the Surgeon General has said that that vaping is not healthy, is not safe, rather, for adolescents nor for pregnant women.
The Surgeon General has said that. Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's get down to, how do we talk to our kids about what are the types of things? I know one of you had a son who vaped, who became an advocate. What do we say about this besides just like, it's bad and it's illegal, don't do it? What are some of the things that actually work in communicating with our children about this?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to have an open line of communication, and that's not always easy, especially when you're dealing with teenagers and you have, all of this stuff going on. So it's important to just start the conversation. And again, it's not a one-time conversation. It's something that's going to go on over weeks and months and, potentially their whole adolescence. But, you just have to say, very kind of offhandedly, I read an article about vaping, do you know anyone who vapes, or is this an issue in your school? Just broach the subject. We say broach the subject very delicately, and don't be accusatory at all. In my case, this was so early on in the Juul epidemic, and I was finding, the Juul devices, which this isn't one, but it looks like this, in my son's pocket. And at first I thought it was a flash drive, but it was just a little too long to be a flash drive. And I looked it up and I saw that it was an, electronic nicotine delivery system. So again, this was before we really understood the predatory practices of Juul and really how they went after our kids. So we just started having an open discussion about nicotine and how these were just the new modern cigarette and how dangerous it was. So I think it's incredibly important. You have to open up a line of conversation. You have to express the fact that you're always there for them. And, if they have any questions or if they want to confide in you about anything. And then, if it does come out, or if you do find out that they've been vaping, it's very important in the beginning not to be punitive, because, don't start, yelling or punishing, because again, you want to keep the open line of conversation, understand kind of where they're at. Are they addicted and they can't stop? If you start yelling right away, you're not going to find that out. So, keep the lines of conversation open. At a certain point, you'll find that every family has different things that work for them. At a certain point, it might be easier to say, well, you know what, I'm going to test you every week, because then they can go back to their friends and say, well, my mom's testing me, I can't vape. So you really have to figure out what works in your family and talk to someone else. It doesn't have to stay within your family. Talk to a trusted advisor at school, talk to a doctor, get some advice on how to talk to your child. And ultimately, if it turns out that they're addicted and they can't stop, how to help treat them.
Right. So the issue, as Dorian said very well, and as she has been, brave enough with her son and her family to talk about, her son's struggle with that, it's not to say that you're not explicit about expectation
and rules.
That's not
right.
the issue. But the issue is to have a constructive conversation. So these substances are illegal for your age. These substances are dangerous. But the first conversation is, especially when you know that 1 in 4 high school students, based on the government's figures, are vaping on a regular basis, is to say to the kids, first of all, it's to educate yourself so you know what you're talking about and you can counter whatever they may say. Oh, mom, everyone's doing it. Oh, it tastes sweet. It can't be the one I'm using. So the issue is to have a constructive conversation that's rooted in your own knowledge base, and share your knowledge with the kids. Explain why these things are dangerous. But the first question we always say is to ask, they say that, they say 1 in 4 kids are using this. They say that the bathrooms in school are called the jewel room. What does it feel like? Is it true? Like you walk into the bathroom and, what is it like to be you? What is it like to be your friends? What is it like, son or daughter, to be living on the front lines, in the age of Juul and flavored vapes? What is it like to be living now when you're in the middle of a youth vaping epidemic? That's the smartest way to open it up. And it really, as Dorian said correctly, it depends on the kid.
Depends on their age.
It depends on their age. I mean, I know from my own son who had been, who had tried these with his friends, he got angry when he heard the Juul person speaking to the kids and telling them it was safe. He started to do his own research. And that is not to say that he has not used it since. And the sad truth is, these devices are stealth by design. I don't care who you are. There is not one parent in America, even if they think they can, who can say unequivocally, without a doubt, that they know for certain their kids have not tried these products or maybe occasionally use them. They're stealth by design, without smell and without smoke, so that we really can't know. And so again, the issue is to talk to the kids. Educate yourself first and educate your kids.
I want to jump in that in the video on Netflix about this, I use Netflix or Amazon, there's kids in class, they're doing, I got to spotlight my video so that people can see me.
It's true. We know exactly what you're going to say.
They're in class and they're like this.
Vapeware.
And they're vaping because the vaping pod is in their sleeve, and they're in the classroom basically getting buzzed, getting distracted from what's going on. And they are, they're doing it at school. And there's one girl that was really addicted. She's like, I really thought it was safe. I didn't know. And now I'm totally addicted and I don't want to be addicted. But
they can't stop.
It's really hard to stop. And when their friends still do it, so then they still do it. And then
if they stop, they're around their friends and it's so easy to be sucked back in.
And I just saw a question go by that said, is there an odor? So these devices smell like fruit. They smell like candy. They smell like gummy bears or, fruit roll-ups. And so, when my son would come home, he smelled very sweet. So at first I thought he was, he had a girlfriend and he was making out or something, because he had this like sweet kind of perfumey smell. And, the devices mixed berry and watermelon, so they smell very sweet. So they don't have a really distinct odor, but there is a light
smell. I mean, the kids will tell you, we adults might not notice if we went into a bathroom, but you ask any teen, they will walk into a bathroom and say, oh, that person was smoking, back in the day, right? Like a year ago. Oh, by the way, back in the day, I wanted to make a serious point, which is this is unfolding so rapidly, Zen, and so many products are flooding onto the market on the backs of Juul, which started the whole thing, that there are already what we're calling, next generation products, because the kids understand that there's been so much media attention that, some adults, hopefully, and many teachers, hopefully, are hip to the fact that, they know what these things look like, or they know that kids are doing it in class. So now some of the concern is that some of these big tobacco companies have invested in or created these flavored nicotine pouches that the kids will hold in their mouth during the day at school with, the same amount of nicotine so they don't get a crash. Or they'll use it during baseball practice. There are a lot of sports teams will use them. And there are also flavored nicotine toothpicks. And in fact, FDA just last week sent a warning letter to one of the toothpick companies because they were selling to underage. So that's how fast it's moving. And again, that is a further catalyst, for what we're doing, and what we're so grateful to you for giving us the opportunity to shed more light on this for parents, for moms across America, because the reality is this is happening so quickly. And we have not gotten a handle on it. When I say we, I mean us as parents, I mean FDA, which has failed to do its job. And if we don't get rid of those flavors almost immediately, the numbers will keep rising. 5.3 million kids. That's the latest study. The year before it was 3.6 million, and nothing has happened. There has been no concrete and action that would lead us to believe that when the researchers come out of the field, the numbers will have gone down. So we're fighting to cut the shocking rate of growth of the epidemic, and then it will take us, God forbid, years to deal with the public health consequences for this generation.
Right. So luckily, there are some states who are taking action and are banning flavored e-cigarette products. States like New Jersey, states like Massachusetts, which are really taking a stand and saying we have to protect our kids. As Meredith said, the federal government has shown that they are moving at a snail's pace, and at that, and 135% increase in kids who vape over the past 2 years. We're scared to see what it's going to be next year. I also just wanted to mention, we were talking about how to get through your teens about vaping. This was an article that ran in the New York Times the Wall Street Journal that we were in with several other adolescent addiction specialists, and it's a really great piece that you can keep it's on our website, so go onto our website and look, but it's a really great reference because it gives you so many different ways to approach your kid, depending on your personality, your style, depending on the age of the child, exactly, and depending on if you're a mom or a doctor. So this is a really great piece and can give you a lot of great information.
And can you say the name of your website again? We're going to start wrapping up.
Yes, it's parentsagainstvaping.org. Okay. And we have, all the latest laws and articles about vaping. We also have all of the latest research papers and health concerns. We have pictures of our parents across America, Parents Against Vaping across America, advocating in different states and standing up against big tobacco. Divided by state where there's a lot going on. And then we have just interesting videos and movies and news clips.
We also have a teen page for things that teens might find interesting.
Right.
And we have lots of resources. So for people who are interested in advocating in their own schools, in their own neighborhoods, in their own states, or educating either themselves or the school nurse or whatever it is, we are both an advocacy organization and an education organization. And, you can log on to parentsagainstvaping.org and look and see if there's a page that says, do something California or do something Massachusetts. And there's also a parent toolkit, which if you sign up, you can download, which is full of resources that are gathered in one place. That, again, to educate yourself, to educate your community, and to take action. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and everyone who listened whole time.
Quick question before we go. Somebody asked which New Jersey legislator is protecting kids. Do you know the names of the New Jersey legislators?
Well, so Governor Phil Murphy has already signed into law a ban on all flavored vaping products
In New Jersey.
in New Jersey. They have not banned all flavored tobacco products, but all flavored e-cigarettes have now been banned in New Jersey, and it's a
Another
law.
question.
And then Frank
Somebody
Pallone.
asked-
And then I'm sorry, back to the New Jersey. Frank Pallone, who is Congressman Pallone
Of New Jersey.
he has a bill in Congress right now which will ban all flavored tobacco products across America. And that is actually in Congress right now. And there are several New Jersey legislators who have supported it, but not all of them have. So that's another thing. If you are from New Jersey and, for instance, you want to write a letter to your legislator to say, please support this national ban on flavored e-cigarettes, you can go to our website and just type in your name and address, and it'll bring you to your Congress member's page where you can write a letter.
Yes.
Great, that's what I wanted to get to. But one other question before we go is somebody asked, doesn't vaping apply to the smoking bans? Like if there's no smoking in a restaurant or in a school, do those smoking laws apply to vaping?
In many states they do. It's the Indoor Clean Air Act, and in New Jersey, in New York, yes, they do, but not in all. I think in Georgia they just passed
In
it.
Atlanta.
In Atlanta.
It's not necessarily in every state, so that's something
Not
that could also
necessarily in every state.
is double
Although
check
now
your state laws.
Tobacco 21 encompasses vaping, so you have to be 21 across America to vape. So that's
You cannot sell
right.
any tobacco products, including vapes, to someone under 21
Right.
now across the country. That was something that was done at the federal level just at the end of the year. But again, we have lots of resources that can connect you. If you're living in a place and you want to know if your state or your city, if the laws refer to vaping as well, you can log on. There is one organization that you can log on to. I think it's like the Public Health Law Center that will tell you. You can log in through our website or go directly to our website based on what our site says, and it can direct you to look at all of the laws.
All right. Well, thank you very much. ParentsAgainstVaping.org. Thank you, Dorian and Meredith.
Yes.
Thank you so
Jen.
much, Zen.
I really appreciate it. Sorry about the technical difficulties. We'll probably edit this first before we put that out, just to get out those technical difficulties, but we will
No
post
worries.
this.
That was on our end, so
Yeah,
apologies.
and you can share it too. And thank you very much for your time tonight. Thank you for your courageous work.
Oh, thank
Thanks,
you.
Jen.
We're very
And
grateful
thank
for
you